Ronaldo said he was back. I guess he meant back to the airport.
Spain advance, Portugal and Cristiano Ronaldo go home.
It's funny, that game against Uzbekistan ended up being the only good game that Portugal played all tournament. They got eliminated in the round of 16, and I guess we should have all seen it coming.
As good as he has been brilliant. I don't think you'll get anybody arguing that. But it's a young man's game. It's a game of pace. It's a game of getting in behind. It's a game of stretching teams. And he can't do that anymore.
Now, going into the tournament, I genuinely thought they were one of the favorites. They had the best left back in the world in Nuno Mendes. They had Vitinha and João Neves, who were coming off the back of back-to-back Champions League winning seasons. They had Rafael Leao. They had Bruno Fernandes, who had just been awarded the best player in the Premier League. I didn't necessarily think they would win it, but I thought they had a very good chance. But from the first game of the World Cup, it was obvious that these guys were not ready to win the whole thing. Right away, first group stage match, they tied the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, I don't want to put any disrespect to DR Congo. In fact, I love that team so much that I made a separate video on them on my channel, because people were so quick to hate on Ronaldo and make fun of Portugal as a whole that they ignored the fact that DR Congo are a very good side. I mean, they pushed England to the final minutes in the round of 32. But even in that match, despite how good DR Congo were, Portugal showed the problems within the team. There was like a hole in the midfield. These guys before the tournament had the best midfield in the world on paper. By the end of the tournament, they had one of the worst midfields.
We came into this World Cup saying that Portugal arguably had the best midfield of any team in the tournament. Yet you'd not seen anything from that incredibly talented midfield.
They got completely outran by DR Congo's midfield. They created nothing. Ronaldo in that game was pretty useless, but as I mentioned in my video after that tie, they also didn't really get him the ball. Like, it's easy to say he had a bad game, and he did, but at the same time, he barely even got a foot on the ball. So what was he supposed to do?
At the same time, though, Ronaldo was not the only underperformer in this Portugal team.
But anyways, in that game, it ended up being a draw, but Portugal could have easily lost. Congo were all over them, and besides the João Neves goal in the beginning of the match where Portugal took the lead, they didn't really create much, which, as we will see later in the video, is basically the theme of Portugal's 2026 World Cup campaign. The second game ended up being a lot better. They played through Bruno Fernandes more, they got Ronaldo more involved, and he scored a brace. And again, at the time, I made a video praising him, that he played better against Uzbekistan than he did against DR Congo, but a lot of his fans seem to have comprehension issues. They didn't watch the full video, and they kept saying that I'm flipping sides. And as we will see later in the video, I wasn't really flipping sides, I was just pointing out what was happening in the match. Now, they played better, but a lot of people obviously brought up the fact that it was just Uzbekistan. Portugal were supposed to win this game. In fact, it would be a tragedy. It would have been horrible if they followed up the tie against DR Congo with a loss or another tie against Uzbekistan.
And if you know anything about the last few years for Cristiano Ronaldo playing for Portugal, Uzbekistan is the sort of team in which he scores 2 goals and we're all good.
He'll thrive.
We're good. We're all right. That's fine. And that, I think, is what's going to happen.
So it was a good performance. Everybody finally clicked. But the real questions were, how are Portugal going to play against a real team, against a top side? No disrespect to Uzbekistan, but it was their first time at the World Cup. They don't have as much quality as that Portuguese side. So it was supposed to be a free 3 points for the Portuguese. And all the criticisms returned in the final group stage match against Colombia. Once again, Portugal created nothing. Colombia destroyed them in possession. They outran them out of possession. It wasn't close. Like, the score will say 0-0, but anybody that watched that game will know Colombia were all over Portugal.
They took the game to Portugal. I thought Portugal looked a little bit leggy in the conditions, but in terms of how Colombia approached the game, every time they got the ball wide, they put crosses in the box. They were dangerous. They were full of running, had energy, had quality, and arguably I think they deserved to win the game.
It was the same themes that we saw against DR Congo. Ronaldo wasn't getting involved. The Portuguese midfield wasn't doing anything. I mean, Vitinha is supposed to dictate the play. All this guy was dictating was his headband and his balls. Bruno was creating no chances now. Even João Neves, who's one of my favorite players on PSG, wasn't doing much. So Portugal ended up getting second in a group that they were supposed to be first in. And as a result, they got a much harder side of the bracket. And this is the funny part. Ronaldo fans tried to push this narrative that FIFA rigged the bracket. That's why Portugal got harder opponents. No, it's because they came second in a group that they were supposed to top. Before the tournament, most people guessed that it would be Portugal at the top with 9 points, or at a bare minimum 7. These guys got 5. So instead of facing Ghana and then Switzerland like Colombia did, they had to play Croatia and Spain. So they go into the round of 32 against Croatia, and again, the same same themes. Vitinha, João Neves, Bruno are outplayed by a 51-year-old Luka Modric and Mateo Kovacic. Again, no disrespect to those two guys, very good central midfielders. Luka Modric is arguably the greatest central midfielder of all time, but he's very old. João Neves and Vitinha are supposed to be in their prime. How are they getting outplayed like this? So again, Portugal create nothing. There's a gap in the midfield. They're pretty much playing with 10 men because Ronaldo is being non-existent. But fortunately for the Portuguese, they come back. They get lucky that the bear hug on Renato Veiga is actually called a penalty. And again, I'm very careful with my phrasing here. It was definitely a penalty, but they were lucky that it was called because those bear hugs, those UFC wrestling moves happen all the time at every single set piece. A couple of days before that, a way worse hug in the box was not called in the Germany versus Paraguay match. So the Portuguese got lucky that the ref actually saw the incident and called it. And Ronaldo scores, he does a sui. At least he finally got a World Cup knockout goal. After that, he gets taken off, and it was completely the right decision by Roberto Martinez. Ronaldo had gotten his goals. They wanted to use somebody else up front against tired legs. Ronaldo naturally was very upset, but it was the right decision. And actually, after he went off, Portugal played more fluid. And what do you know? The guy who replaced him up front, Gonçalo Ramos, ends up scoring the winner.
The bravest decision of them all. Ronaldo's coming off the field. Could that happen when the game is 1-1, when the game is on the balance? Yes, it could happen. And it was the right decision. It was the correct decision.
Now, of course, Croatia scored the equalizer, but it gets ruled out from a sketchy VAR decision, and I'm not here to debate that call. It touched a tiny strand of hair on his head that was caught by the censors. They said that the touch on Renato Veiga was involuntary, and boom, they ruled it out. I'm not here to debate that. The point is that once again, Portugal barely got a result. They have this talented team, and they were just scraping by. Against Colombia, they barely scraped by too. There was a controversial VAR decision there as well after Colombia had scored. Again, controversial because the line seemed sketchy and it looked like the guy's toe might have been offside. By the letter of the law, it was the right decision. But again, the main theme that I'm trying to teach you guys is that except for the game against Uzbekistan, Portugal barely won matches. They even barely got results because there were games that they didn't even win, but they were lucky not to lose. Still, they get through Croatia and then they play Spain. And once again, what do you know? The same theme. The midfield doesn't create anything. That Portugal versus Spain game was one of the worst matches I've watched at the World Cup. It was a complete snooze fest. It was so weird to watch because half the players on the pitch either played for PSG or Barcelona, two of the most entertaining clubs in world football. And yet the game was like watching paint dry. Everybody was poor. Vitinha was poor. Pedri was poor. Yamal didn't have a great game. Portugal, again, created nothing. Rafael Leao didn't start despite being the X factor in the game against Croatia. So once again, I don't know what Roberto Martinez was doing. Pedro Neto, useless on the right-hand side. The Portuguese midfield, non-existent. Vitinha, João Neves, Bruno, all just doing cardio. And a lot of those guys should be very thankful that Ronaldo was such a big name because he took away a lot of the blame that should have been put on this midfield. Again, a lot of his fans only listen to the jokes in the beginning of the video and not watch this whole thing. I'm not fully and solely blaming Ronaldo for Portugal's collapse. That midfield, considering they're supposed to be in the prime of their careers, should have played a lot better, but I'll get to why they performed poorly later in the video. But anyways, this game was a snooze fest against Spain, and Mikel Merino put all of us out of our suffering by scoring the winner, because I don't know if I could have handled another 30 minutes of that. And boom, before you know it, Portugal were eliminated in the round of 16. Now, the first person to blame for all of this is Roberto Martinez, because to me, it seemed like it was his instructions for this team with so much talent to play such a pragmatic and risk-free style of play. They didn't try anything risky, and I refuse to believe that it's because players like Vitinha and Bruno Fernandes don't have the ability to break lines or carry the ball forward. To me, it was clear that he told them to keep it safe, to keep possession, to not try and be too risky in possession.
Being unable to get a tune out of that midfield three, again, that is as damning a criticism on Roberto Martinez.
And that's the worst thing you could do for a midfield as talented as those guys. That's why they were getting outplayed in every single match. The DR Congo midfield outran them. Colombia's double pivot was much better. Modric and Kovacic pushed these guys to the edge. And even Pedri, despite not playing well with Rodri, and later Fabian Ruiz, got the better of the Portuguese midfield. So it was definitely on Roberto Martinez. And even in the videos that I made before the World Cup began hyping Portugal, because I know people are going to talk about that because once again, people only look at the title and thumbnail instead of watching the videos, I mentioned that Roberto Martinez is going to be one of the biggest question marks when it comes to the Portuguese national team, because he doesn't have a lot of credit in the bank. He very much wasted Belgium's golden generation. He wasn't that great of a manager at club level, and what he did with Portugal at Euro 2024 wasn't exactly that impressive. The only thing saving him was the fact that Portugal won the Nations League, but as you saw in a real competition, in an actual major tournament, the team crumbled, because the Ronaldo guys even fooled me. I was watching back some of those Nations League games and I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't the biggest tournament and it's not as serious as the World Cup or the Euros, but Portugal did get the better of Germany. They did get the better of Spain. Ronaldo seemed to be moving better than he was 1-2 years ago at the time that the Nations League was played. So even I started buying in. I'm like, okay, Martinez came in by starting Ronaldo and giving him trust, unlike in 2022. Maybe he's helped create a better environment around the players and they'll all come together and play for CR7. That wasn't true. All that Nations League did was put a bandage on some big ass cracks that were apparent in this team. Now, the second problem is, of course, Cristiano Ronaldo himself, the elephant in the room. It goes hand in hand with Roberto Martinez because Martinez basically refused to bring him off. He did it once in that game against Croatia and it paid off. He didn't do it in any other match. Even against Colombia, why was Ronaldo playing the full 90 minutes, especially when he had no impact? Now again, I don't want to make it seem like if Gonçalo Ramos played every single minute that Portugal were going to win the World Cup. As I told you guys in the first half of the video, there was issues with the midfield. There were issues with Roberto Martinez's tactics. So just having a different guy up front wasn't going to necessarily solve all of these. But I think it would have been a lot easier for the midfield to create certain opportunities if they didn't have a 41-year-old up front. The amount of times Ronaldo would drop deep and ruin the attacks was crazy. Yes, he kept possession. Yes, he was safe with his passes and he didn't give it away. But the guy was more stiff than an erection. He didn't need to be coming back. There was one point, I think against Croatia, where he literally was standing next to Leao on a counterattack. I don't know what he was trying to do. He's never been that type of player to drop deep. He should have been playing like Erling Haaland. Stay up front, don't get a lot of touches, but be efficient in the opportunities created for you. Now, he couldn't really play like that because, like I stated, Portugal were not creating enough chances for him. But that's a Martinez issue. When you realize that's happening, take him off. Use somebody else.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame that Roberto Martinez didn't have a big enough personality, a big enough put his feet down and say, I have to do what's best for the team. He didn't do what's best for the team. That's 100% fact.
Roberto Martinez could have done multiple different things. He could have started Ronaldo to help him with his ego and let him have the confidence and not disrupt the harmony within the locker room, but then pull him out in the 70th minute and bring on Gonçalo Ramos against tired legs. Or he could have done it vice versa, started Gonçalo Ramos and then brought on Ronaldo against tired legs. We know the second option wasn't going to happen because Ronaldo wasn't just going to sit on the bench anymore, but there are other things that he could have done, and he didn't do any of them. And instead, Portugal played a lot of these games with just 10 men because Ronaldo wasn't doing anything. And again, it's not solely his fault. He wasn't the only problem, but he certainly wasn't the solution. He's excellent in the box, great in the air, but if you're not going to whip in crosses to him, then he's useless on the pitch. Genuinely, he was offering nothing. Ramos at least is a little bit more fluid in his movement. At least give the guy 15-20 minutes, even if they played next to each other in a 4-4-2, and then you pulled Ronaldo off. It just didn't make sense to keep playing this guy. And to me, this entire World Cup campaign seemed like the CR7 testimonial farewell, rather than a tournament where Portugal were actually trying to do what's best for the country. I understand that Ronaldo is a confident guy, so he's probably thinking, I'm still better than Gonçalo Ramos, but that's not what the performance is stated. He played too many minutes, and they weren't able to get him the ball enough. And when they did get it to him, he's not the same guy. I told you guys, scoring in the Saudi League and scoring in Nations League is not the same as playing at the World Cup. And I remember his fans came for me after I was criticizing him after the game against DR Congo. By the way, I didn't even go that hard on him if anybody actually watched the full video. I talked about the fact that the Portuguese midfield was essentially ignoring him and not even getting him the ball. But those guys didn't watch the video and they were like, how could you say that about one game? Why are you being so reactionary? The criticisms that Ronaldo got at the 2026 World Cup were not just because of 1 or 2 games at the World Cup. It has been building up since the 2022 World Cup. All of the criticisms around Ronaldo, the debate between him and Gonçalo Ramos, the debate around why he keeps playing every single minute, why he's starting games, these were all happening 4 years ago. He was dropped in 2022, which actually helped the team beat Switzerland and they made a deep run. Again, Gonçalo Ramos started against Morocco and Portugal didn't win, so he's not like the perfect solution, but at least the team got further. And then in the 2024 Euros, they played Ronaldo again and he was equally ass. So the criticisms around him are not new. We had 2 tournaments before the 2026 World Cup to judge our decisions on. And everything people said about him was right. He had 1 good game against Uzbekistan and told us he was back, but the reality is he was never ever helping this Portuguese team. I mean, this guy even in his prime was not that great at the World Cup, so what did people expect a 41-year-old version of him to do? Now, it's not all doom and gloom for Portugal as a whole. They have so many talented players. All they have to do is get a more competent manager than Roberto Martinez and stop having a retirement home striker up front. Once they do that, I think they'll be just fine. Ronaldo has done a lot for Portugal, but it's time for him to leave it to the new generation because there is a massive shadow that just follows him. You guys remember after the DR Congo game, his fans were abusing João Neves and Conceição, Ronaldo's own teammates. The quicker this guy steps away, the more opportunities Portugal will have to rebuild. He did a lot for them, but now it's time to go.
Cristiano's been here for so long and it's a new opportunity for some of the more senior players to take that responsibility, but for younger players to come through. So I think as disappointed as they'll be now with going out of competition, I think this is the start of a new era for them.
If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you will love this one too. Check it out right here.